San Francisco City Guides is a nonprofit organization offering free walking tours every day of the week. They offer over 70 different tours led by knowledgeable and enthusiastic volunteer guides. Their purpose is to preserve and perpetuate the history and folklore of San Francisco and to celebrate its rich history of cultural diversity. Take a tour through San Francisco's Chinatown, one of the oldest Chinese communities outside of China.
Good morning. My name is Bill Louie, and I'm a San Francisco city guide for Chinatown. I'm one of nearly 300 volunteer guides leading this past year in total more than 30,000 walkers throughout San Francisco on more than 70 different tours each week. Our program started back in 1978 when the city librarian, Gladys Hanson, was asked by the then mayor of San Francisco, Dianne Feinstein, to provide guided tours for the newly renovated City Hall. Shortly thereafter, the group grew and more tours were added, so that Dianne Feinstein designated us as the docents for the city of San Francisco. Because we're a nonprofit, we don't have a regular source of income. We do have about 20% of our income come from private sources, including the Wells Fargo History Museum and grants for the arts through the Hotel Tax Fund. However, 80% of our funding, which is used to pay for our 2 full-time staff members and for the maintenance of the website, are paid through your contributions, either when you logged on to register for a tour or when you make cash donations at the end of the tour. If you're interested in joining one of our tours, all you need to do is to go to our website, sfcityguides.org, and check out the different tours that we have available. You can join by either registering in advance or merely by showing up at the starting point at the designated time for that particular tour. Because of our affiliation with the public library, we will not charge you for the tour. However, we ask you kindly to generously donate because we are a purely volunteer organization. Our board of directors are volunteers, our training staff are volunteers. So I think we do it as volunteers because of our love for San Francisco, and also we get the chance to tell stories about San Francisco. I'm going to ask you to get in line to get a free sample of the best fortune cookie you're ever going to have. So the reason I want you to get in line first and get a cookie in hand, then I'll tell you about the Golden Gate Fortune Cookie Factory. So please follow me. There's 3 ovens. The aluminum urn is dropping the raw dough onto a little plate. It goes around in a circle, goes through the oven, and it comes out fresh. The Golden Gate Fortune Cookie Factory was started by Franklin Yi in 1960. He comes to the United States in 1950, earns money, saves it in order to start a fortune cookie factory. He has enough money to buy the 3 ovens that you see in there. Doesn't have enough money to actually buy the machines to fold the cookies. They have them. Germany made them, China made them, but he didn't have that. So what he did, because he had that sufficient capital to open the store and open the ovens, he hired people to manually fold the soft cookies around the little slips of fortune. And when he first opened, he was lucky to gross about $5 a day. But over time, and this is rare where you don't see a line in front of this particular store, it's grown to become the most popular site for both tourists and also locals. Because as you can tell, Franklin opened it. It's now managed by his nephew, Kevin Yi. And as Kevin Yi explains to me, it's pure ingredients. It's very simple, straightforward. Basically eggs, flour, vanilla, sugar. And that's basically all that goes into the batter. What you're going to eat are the rejects. So it has to be perfectly round and soft. If it doesn't, they push it off and drop it into the tin. And that's what the woman was doing, reaching into that tin for the rejects. But in this case, because it's like anything that's freshly baked, cookies, pies, whatever, they taste the best right then and there. This is different than, let me go a little bit more detail. It's like there are over 20,000 Chinese restaurants in the United States. You can go to very isolated places like Butte, Montana, Boise, well, not Boise, Idaho. People in Boise probably resent that, but very obscure places, and you're going to find a Chinese restaurant. And at the end of your Chinese meal, along with your bill, you're going to get a cellophane wrapped fortune cookie. And that's because that's expected now in Chinese restaurants. And how did we get to that stage and how did we get to that point is the last story I'm going to tell you. The fortune cookie is not Chinese. The closest, the best authority we have in terms of historic research is that a Japanese cracker called Senbei were found in tea shops outside Osaka, which has a lot of religious temples. So you go to the tea shop afterwards, and underneath the senbei, in a fold, tucked into the fold, would be a Zen saying, and that's how the concept started. The Japanese also migrated to the United States, and they incorporated that fold with fortune around the cookie, inserted into the cookie at the Japanese tea garden. So that's where it really started in California, in San Francisco. Now, so Japanese bakers were creating these fortune cookies in the Japanese tea garden. Now, during World War II, what happens is all the Japanese in the Japanese tea garden are removed and placed in concentration camps throughout the United States. And so the city has a dilemma, and they decide what they're going to do is to hire Chinese, and they rename it, instead of Japanese tea garden, they call it the Oriental tea garden. And so the Chinese are serving tea, pouring tea, and passing out these Japanese cookies. Now, it's during World War II, and San Francisco is a major port for the war in the Pacific. And American GIs love the fortune cookies. They drink their tea, and they can't wait to crack open that little cookie to read what their fortunes will be. And they laugh, and they very anxiously look forward to getting that fortune cookie. And they tell each other about it, so they all make it a point to go visit the Oriental Tea Garden. And some of the Chinese servers and some of the Chinese workers notice this level of enjoyment and pleasure. So they go to their relatives who run Chinese restaurants here in Chinatown. And they go to them and they say, you know how at the end of the meal, your customers say, what's for dessert? What do you have for dessert? Now, the ideal Cantonese dessert are freshly sliced oranges. It's light, it's palate cleansing, and it's an ideal dessert for as far as Chinese are concerned. They say, well, you might try these cookies that are made, used to be made by Japanese bakers, and try that. And so it took off here in San Francisco's Chinatown first, and that's why now, as I said, anywhere in the United States, you're going to find fortune cookies. I like this particular starting point because of the view that's behind me. So if you gaze at an area that's about 4 blocks behind, 2 blocks to your right, and 2 blocks to your left, you're looking at a space about 16 city blocks. This is San Francisco's traditional Chinatown. It is the oldest Chinatown in North America. And it's a Chinatown that was created by racial discrimination. If you were Chinese, you could not move outside of this area until 1950. 1950. And this was founded pretty soon after the start of California, after the founding of the state of California. We'll go in more details about that. So that segregation had significant disadvantages, and in some ways it also provided a few advantages to the Chinese that moved here. This is a monument constructed to the first public schoolhouse in California. It's constructed in 1847. It becomes inhabited. It's a one-room schoolhouse, 30 school children, 1 school teacher, all different ages. It becomes inhabited in April of 1848, and then in May of 1848, it's abandoned. The parents come out and take the school children out. The school teacher leaves. So what happens in California in 1848? Actually, in January of 1848, they discover gold. So it transforms the discovery of gold, doesn't create the gold rush until President Polk, in explaining why he bought California in January of 1848, says, you know what? There's gold in California, this new territory that we discovered. And he says that we've assayed the results, and then the word goes out that, in fact, there is gold in California. And so the gold rush happens the following year. And we remember that because what is the name of the San Francisco professional football team? 49ers, see? If I'm standing here, I want you to look at what's behind me. So, behind me is a typical Chinatown building. First floor has retail shops to generate revenue for the owners of this building. The second and third floors are the residential facilities. So visualize a space that's 8 by 10 feet or 3 by 3.5 meters. And that would be a single resident occupant space, or SRO. And the SRO, we have a picture from last year of such a resident. It's a small, it's like a very small hotel room, but that hotel room is going to serve as your living room, bedroom, dining room, media, library, gym, office, all in that 8 by 10 space. And then visualize 10 such 8 by 10 spaces per floor. You see 2 floors, and then 1 communal kitchen, 1 communal bathroom. And it's obviously very crowded, but the reality is here in San Francisco, it's not 1 person per room, it's more like, on the average, 2.5 people per room. And the reality is, housing here in Chinatown is 7 times more dense than the rest of San Francisco. And it's considered to be the most dense housing in the United States, except for New York City, except for Manhattan in New York City, which has higher density because they have higher storied apartment buildings. Question might come naturally to your mind, why would you want to live in such a crowded facility? A couple of reasons. The rent you have to pay for those one-room houses, one-room SROs, is somewhere between $500 to $750 a month. What happened here on April the 17th, 1906? Nothing happened on April the 17th, 1906. But the next morning at about 5:30 a.m., an earthquake strikes San Francisco. It's on the Richter scale about 7.9. It's a very heavy, serious magnitude. It shakes the earth for about 30 seconds, and it serves to do 2 critical things. It severs the main water lines connecting San Francisco to the rest of the peninsula. That's one thing it does. And the other thing it does, it serves to kill the acting fire chief. So, because of the earthquake, gas lines are severed. So in the mornings, as women turn on their gas stoves to heat up their breakfasts, fires break out. And soon thereafter, San Francisco looks like this. Now, if we were about 2 blocks up that way and looking eastward, we would have seen this in 1906, in the days following the earthquake. It would look like this. This is San Francisco burning. There's no water sources, except for one critical area near Dolores Park. There's one fire hydrant. All the other fire hydrants are dry because they don't have any water pressure, water supply. But there's one fire hydrant in Dolores Park, somehow magically has water and is able to put out fires in the nearby area. There's questions about whether it's a couple of houses or it's an entire city block. But that's why each year on April the 18th, the residents around Dolores Park uh, carry a bucket of gold paint and they repaint that fire hydrant gold to express its appreciation for continuing to provide water during the earthquake more than 100 years ago. As you might guess, San Franciscans are very sentimental. And to personalize the fire hydrant, I love that story. But they did other very intelligent things in response to those fires because of the absence of water. And one of them is, you see this intersection right here? There's a circular red brick pattern. And the reason it's arranged that way is to notify firefighters that if they lift that street cover, they can tap into a water reservoir. So if you walk around different parts, particularly old parts of San Francisco, and you see these at the intersections, underneath that is water reservoirs because there was no water available to put out the fires. They printed, when we crossed Grant Avenue, I pointed out that the street name was engraved into the curb, and that's because street signs were in wood during the fires. And in response to the earthquake, San Francisco had a choice. They really wanted to move the Chinese out of Chinatown. Well, why? Because, well, it was a den of inequity. I always wanted to say that. Did I say that right? Den of inequity, right? Okay. Because there were brothels here. There were gambling dens. There were opium dens. Around the opium dens, there was one shop that specialized in cleaning and repairing opium pipes. And there were houses of prostitution, white and Chinese. And the reason it existed that way for the vice is because law enforcement was very lax. The law enforcement that was here, the police authorities that were here, were corrupt. So they wanted to move all the Chinese out. They wanted to move them to an area, swampland, near San Francisco Airport. And but the Chinese resisted. They did not like that idea because, well, they liked it here. As you know, it's a little cool, but this is probably the warmest part of San Francisco. It has the best weather because we're very far from the water's edge on the Pacific Ocean side. And so we get the temperate, moderating effects of San Francisco Bay. It's also central to San Francisco. We're close to Nob Hill, about 3 blocks to the east. We're near the financial district, and already by 1900, before the earthquake, in books about tourism in San Francisco, there will always be sections that said, for an experience unlike anywhere else, where you can sample exotic foods and purchase goods from the distant Orient, go to San Francisco's Chinatown. And so already, this was attracting a lot of people, both locals and also people from outside of San Francisco, to visit Chinatown. So Chinatown merchants were generating a lot of tax revenue. So the merchants here, particularly one insightful Chinese American merchant, Look Tin Ely, had a vision. He said, now I'll try to quote him directly, exactly, I want to create a veritable Oriental fairyland in which goods from the Orient could be sold. So he convinced a couple of merchants along Grant Avenue to build structures that reflected Oriental values. And so they went to American architects and said, look, can you do this for us? American architects, wanting a commission, said, well, of course, we can do it. But American architects at that time, at the turn in the early 1900s, were all trained in one school of architecture. And that school of architecture was in Paris. It's the Beaux-Arts School of Architecture. Beaux-Arts architecture does not work in Chinatown because the lots are narrow, rectangular structure locations. So even if your building's burned down, it's nothing but rubble, you own the land underneath. But your land is just a narrow, rectangular strip. And Beaux-Arts architecture requires large, massive lots to build large, grandiose buildings. The American architects say, no, we can still do it. Never mind Beaux-Arts. So what they do is study watercolors and oil paintings of Chinese and Japanese temples and houses going back 300 to 400 years. and they look at it and they study it and they said, absolutely, we can do it for you. And so they see certain commonalities in the architectural features of these buildings 300 to 400 years old. For example, the roof lines, this corner building, see the roof line, the little stub roof that sticks out? The eaves curve upward. And you say, oh, that's very oriental. That looks kind of Chinese, kind of Japanese. So they incorporate that feature. If you look at the facade of that building next to the corner building, front of the first floor on the street side is flush with the street, the sidewalk. The second one, the facade on the second and the third floor are also flush with the street. But the fourth floor, the front or the facade is recessed. And that's because the architects wanted to recreate a trompe l'oeil. That's a French phrase for trick of the eye. It makes the roof overhead seem more overhanging and larger than it really is. Walk up 4 flights of stairs and visit a Taoist temple. It has the original religious artifacts for both Taoists, Buddhists, and also, they don't have Confucian gods, but that building is worth going up if you have that time. It's called the Tin Hao Temple. And it's been closed for the last 2 years, and they just recently opened it. And if you're lucky, they have an English speaker who can interpret it for you. But it's worth going there just to see some of the old religious artifacts that's located in that building. They don't require a $2 donation. And I would pay that $2 donation just to get the sticks of incense to light and burn at the god that's it's Chinese religion. I think is like a bureaucracy. You have gods for your children, gods for luck, gods for health, gods for travel. And that main god there is Tin Hao. She is the Taoist god for travel. When the Cantonese first landed here in the United States, they said, well, wow, we crossed the ocean. That was very strenuous, dangerous trip. To show that we're not fickle believers, we're going to erect this shrine to Tin Hao in appreciation for her bringing us safely across the oceans. Red is basically the Chinese color of choice. And it happened even before the Communist Party took it and named themselves Red Communists. Very clever to do that. To the Chinese, red represents life, rebirth, and it's everywhere that you look. And it's used, firecrackers are red. And in fact, I've heard it said that after the firecrackers are popped and they leave all this little scattered red paper, they say, leave it, because it's good luck, that color red. During Chinese New Year's, they pass around little envelopes in which money is enclosed for you to give to children. And that is a red envelope. When you graduate from a Chinese university or school, your graduation certificate is always written in red. Another example of the color red is on the Chinese electronic stock market. When the prices go up, unlike all the other stock markets, they are printed in red, because red is a good thing. You're not going to use it to show prices going down in the stock market. Now, across from us is a real good example of this kind of Chinatown-ish vision, using the colors, well, obviously you have to use Chinese writing, because it's Chinese-owned stores and Chinese goods. And if you look, these buildings are built side by side. There's no side entrances. So the fire escapes either have to be in the front or the back of the building. Along this alleyway, all the fire escapes are built in front, and you can see how they incorporate different elements of kind of vaguely oriental theme even into the scroll work in laying it out, or in their use of colors, the use of lanterns.